I met Tanya at a friend's party 5 years ago. She was wearing a red dress and was glowing in the center of the dance floor. I plucked up the courage to talk to her, but I didn't expect to hit it off right away. We quickly fell in love and entered into marriage hand in hand. Life after marriage was uneventful and happy. Tanya was a gentle and virtuous wife, and our relationship was always stable. However, in retrospect, those years were just like the moon in a mirror, passing by in a flash. The nightmare began that fateful night. Tanya was partying with her friends to celebrate the success of their company's project. Before we left the house, she excitedly told me that she was going to have a relaxing night, and I laughed and told her to be safe. I had no idea that this was the decision that would change the course of our destiny forever. A link to a video on a website was the beginning of my fear. The subject of the video was my wife, Tanya, who was leaning into the arms of a strange man and kissing like nobody's business. As the scene progressed, their actions became more and more daring and explicit. My heart sank to the bottom. The number of views and comments on the video was a grim reminder that this unsavory secret had spread throughout the social networks. Trembling, I dialed Tanya's number, but there was no answer. I stayed up all night. The image of Tanya with that man Bob played over and over again in my mind. I felt disgust, anger, shame, and deep despair. At dawn, Tanya came home drunk and avoided answering my questions. She explained vaguely that it was a friend's prank and told me not to take it personally. But how could I turn a blind eye? For the next few days, I worked like a zombie. I could only smile at the concerned inquiries of my colleagues to minimize the impact of the incident. But my shattered self-esteem and full-blooded anger almost engulfed me. To add to my despair, private messages and comments poured in, strangers sympathizing or gloating over my misfortune, invariably mentioning the video, the betrayal. The shame of having no place to run was overshadowing my life. I tried to communicate with Tanya, but she just denied it and blamed it on alcohol and friends. She cried and apologized, asking for forgiveness. There was a time when her tears could easily melt my heart. But this time, in the face of her tears, I felt nothing but strangeness and alienation. Trust, like a mirror, once broken, can never be repaired, and Tanya's betrayal made me lose faith in the marriage. I know we can't go back. In the dead of night, I tossed and turned, thinking about Tanya's breathing, which used to put me at ease, but was now as harsh as noise. I began to think, was our relationship built on lies from the beginning? The thought that sprang up took root in my mind like poison. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I never really knew Tanya. Perhaps I needed to find the truth. I made up my mind that no matter what the cost, I would lift the veil of deception, even if it meant I would end up in hell. At the very least, I couldn't allow myself to live a lie. Thus, in a fog, I began a journey to find the truth. I didn't know whether salvation or deeper despair awaited me ahead, but I had no choice but to go on, step by step. Ever since that ominous video appeared, my life has been unsettled. I spent countless sleepless nights tossing and turning, replaying images of Tanya and Bob in my mind. I felt fooled and betrayed, and all the good things I had been doing had gone out the window. I tried to convince myself to believe Tanya's explanation, that maybe it was just an accident. But deep inside, a voice told me that it was not that simple. My intuition drove me to find the truth, even if it might lead me to the bottom of the abyss. I started to do some undercover research, gathering all the information I could about that night. I contacted Tanya's friends and tried to get a clue from them. However, they were either vague or simply didn't want to talk about it. This heightened my suspicions. Finally, my good friend Jerry inadvertently revealed some details to me. It turned out that Tanya and Bob's intimate interactions at the party had already attracted the attention of others. They were overheard whispering in the corner about something that didn't seem to have anything to do with the company. The news came as a thunderbolt, shattering my last vestiges of hope. I realized that I had to face the truth, no matter how brutal it was. I began to gather evidence in an organized fashion. I found several eyewitnesses who described to me the intimate behavior of Tanya and Bob at the party. Although they didn't see the final live feed, there was no doubt that it was no ordinary coworker interaction. My heart suffered as the investigation progressed. I found myself questioning every moment I spent with Tanya. Her smiles, her caresses, her sweet words, all became false and blinding in the haze of truth. What broke my heart the most was that I eventually found the full live video. I forced myself to watch it frame by frame, witnessing the process of my wife's betrayal. Every second was like a sharp blade, mercilessly cutting into my heart. At the end of the video, Tanya and Bob were kissing like nobody's business, and their eyes were filled with ecstasy. At that moment, I felt as if my heart had stopped beating. My wife, whom I loved and trusted, was on camera with another man. The pain almost tore me apart. I turned off the video and buried my face in my hands. I felt a mixture of remorse, shame, and anger. I hated Tanya for being unfaithful, but I also hated myself for being blind and stupid. Why didn't I see her for what she was? Our marriage is so fragile that it can't stand the test of temptation. The process of investigation made me feel stranger to Tanya than ever before. I began to question every moment we met and fell in love. Was her love for me genuine, or was it something else? I couldn't tell the difference between what was real and what wasn't, and I felt a sense of powerlessness and despair. The evidence is in front of me, the truth is in the air, but I still found it hard to accept. I wished it was all just a nightmare and I could wake up to Tanya's familiar smile. But reason told me that I had to accept the reality that our relationship was irreversible. That night, I tossed and turned, the image of Tanya's betrayal flashing in my mind. Anger, like lava, was churning in my chest. I gritted my teeth and clenched my fists, almost crushing my teeth and knuckles. I couldn't forgive Tanya for her deception, and I couldn't forgive Bob for his. A horrible thought began to take root in my mind. I want revenge. I want them to feel the taste of betrayal. The urge for violence began to grow. I don't know how much longer I can keep my sanity. Anger, little by little, was eating away at my soul. I vaguely realized that if I continued like this, I might do something irreparable. But at this moment, the desire for revenge far outweighed all concerns. I thought, maybe I really had no way back. Since Tanya chose to betray me, don't blame me for being ruthless. I suffered the pain of betrayal alone in the darkness of the long night, and my anger gradually turned into hatred. I secretly vowed to make Tanya and Bob pay. This thought gave me a twisted sense of relief. Maybe, after all, I'm on a path of no return. But I had no choice but to do so. In order to defend my trampled dignity, in order to punish the deception, I embarked on the road of vengeance without hesitation, even though there may be no end in sight. The truth, like a punch in the face, crushed me. Tanya's infidelity, Bob's treachery, and that damn video, all mocking my stupidity and blindness. I felt like a joke, a pathetic person who had been lied to and fooled. Those days, I was a mess. During the day, I forced myself to smile and completed my work mechanically. At night, I tossed and turned, replaying the images of Tanya and Bob in my mind. I tried to convince myself to calm down, tried to analyze this betrayal with reason. But my emotions, like a flood, engulfed me. Anger has become my most faithful companion. It followed me everywhere, eating away at every cell of my body. I was angry at Tanya's deception, angry at Bob's shamelessness, and even more angry at my own ignorance. This anger, mixed with deep pain, almost drove me crazy. I started to get irritable. A single look or a single word could trigger my outburst. Concerned questions from my coworkers were only met with a casual response. I knew I was on the verge of losing control, but I couldn't stop it. The hardest part was those sleepless nights. When night falls and I am alone in the darkness, the pain in my heart pours out uncontrollably. I thought about Tanya and me over and over again, trying to find some clues. But the more I thought back, the more unreal I felt. The relationship I once thought was indestructible turned out to be so fragile. The pain, it follows me everywhere. It tore at my heart and left me almost breathless. I often wake up in the middle of the night to find myself in tears. Tanya on my pillow, once my greatest comfort, has now become the source of my pain. I don't know how much longer we can live like this. I tried to communicate with Tanya, wanting an explanation, but every time, she was in tears, begging me for forgiveness. She said it was just an impulse and that it was the alcohol's fault. She said I was the only one she loved and begged me to give her another chance. Once upon a time, I would have believed every word she said without hesitation. But now, her tears and vows seem so hypocritical to me. A thought began to run through my mind. I want revenge. I want to give them a taste of betrayal. At first, the thought made me feel guilty. Gradually, it spread like poison and took over my entire mind. I began to fantasize about all kinds of revenge scenarios, about Tanya's and Bob's agonizing expressions of remorse. These fantasies gave me a sick pleasure. I knew that I was being eaten up by hatred. Reason told me to calm down and think about our future. But every time I closed my eyes, all I could think about was the intimate image of Tanya and Bob. I couldn't forgive, I couldn't forget. And so, over countless nights of tossing and turning, a crazy plan took shape in my mind. I want Bob to pay. I want Tanya to lose him forever. This thought tormented me day and night like a maggot. I knew that if I carried it out, our marriage and our lives would be ruined. But I had no choice. The moment I made up my mind, I felt a calmness that I had never felt before. Perhaps this is the kind of peace a desperate person feels at the last moment before making a big decision. I know that everything has been reversed. What was once beautiful has been ruthlessly crushed by reality. All I can do is to seek the last bit of relief in pain and anger. The thought gave me a small sense of relief. I closed my eyes and contemplated in the darkness. I was ready to face the unknown tomorrow and all the consequences of my decision. It all started with Tanya's indulgence, one fateful night. A night that was destined to be a turning point in my life, a watershed in my destiny. The pain and anger had been simmering in my heart for too long. I knew that if I didn't take action, these negative emotions would eventually consume my sanity and destroy my life. I had to do something to break this vicious cycle. My good friend, Jerry, has been a pillar of support and a helper. He has always been a silent observer of my situation, giving me comfort and advice when I was at my lowest point. When I confided in him my desire for revenge, he didn't discourage me, but offered to fight alongside me. And so, a crazy, bold plan took shape as we plotted. We decided to teach Bob a lesson and let him feel hurt. We spent a couple of days following Bob around, getting a feel for his movements. We chose a remote location, an alley that Bob passed through every week, as the place to strike. The night of the operation, I was nervous and excited at the same time. Jerry and I put on our masks and ambushed him in the alley. The moment I saw Bob, my anger peaked. This was the man who had ruined my marriage and my life. We rushed forward and attacked Bob. In the confusion, Bob was wounded and fell to the ground. Seeing his pained face, I felt a little bit of pleasure. It seemed that all the pent-up frustration of the past few days had been cathartically released through violence. But when Jerry signaled me to stop, I suddenly realized that I had done something irreparable. I realized that violence didn't solve the problem. It degraded me into someone I didn't know. We left the scene in a hurry. On the way home, I had mixed feelings. On the one hand, I felt the thrill of revenge. But on the other hand, a deep sense of guilt came over me. I didn't know how to face Tanya or our marriage. That night, I tossed and turned, unable to sleep. Bob's tragic situation, Jerry's clamor, Tanya's smile, intertwined into a crazy nocturne, in my mind haunting. I began to doubt whether it was really worthwhile for me to embark on the road of revenge. But deep down, there was a voice that told me I had no choice, that Bob's wounds had been inflicted. My relationship with Tanya had been fractured. The only thing I could do was to continue on this path until the end. The next day, when I saw on the news that Bob had been hospitalized, I felt a twinge of pleasure. It was a morbid emotion, I knew, but at the moment, that morbidity seemed to be my only solace. I called Jerry to thank him for his help. On the other end of the line, Jerry was silent for a long time before he said quietly, "Steve, we can't go on like this. Violence will not solve any problem. We need to calm down, think about the future of the road to go." I laughed bitterly and hung up the phone. Jerry was right, but it was too late. Bob's injury, Tanya's infidelity, the pain in my heart, all of them had become facts that could not be changed. The only thing I can do is to keep going, no matter whether there is light or darkness in front of me. For the next few days, I was a mess. I went to work mechanically, ate mechanically, and lived mechanically. I tried to avoid being alone with Tanya because I didn't know how to face her or how to handle our relationship. But I know we can't go on like this. One day, I'd have to make a choice. One day, I'd have to have a showdown with Tanya and decide what our future would be. The thought terrified me, but at the same time, it also gives me a sense of relief. Perhaps it is only through pain and struggle that we can find our true selves and the meaning of life. Maybe this is my destiny. Perhaps I am destined to go through this emotional storm to see the truth of life. Whether there is light or darkness ahead, I must walk bravely. Since that night of vengeance, the atmosphere between Tanya and me has become increasingly tense. We were like two strangers, living under the same roof, but with different agendas. I knew we needed to talk, to face the problems in our marriage. Finally, on a rare day off, I gathered my courage and decided to have a showdown with Tanya. That morning, I prepared a big breakfast, hoping to ease the tension between us. Tanya looked surprised, but sat down and joined me for dinner. At first, we exchanged insignificant pleasantries, deliberately avoiding the heavy topic. But as time passed, I knew I couldn't avoid it any longer. I took a deep breath, looked Tanya straight in the eye, and slowly spoke. Tanya, we need to talk. About you and Bob, about the video, about our marriage. Tanya's face instantly turned pale. She opened her mouth as if to say something, but eventually fell silent. Her reaction convinced me that my suspicions were correct. I tried to stay calm, even though my heart was in turmoil. I said, word for word, I know everything, Tanya. I know about you and Bob. I know that you betrayed our marriage. I want to know why, and I want to know what our relationship really means to you. Tanya finally burst into tears. Her tears used to make my heart ache, but now I just felt a chill. She choked on her sobs and said brokenly, I'm sorry, Steve, I'm sorry. I know I hurt you and betrayed our marriage. But believe me, it was just an impulse, a bad decision. The person I love has always been you, and my feelings for you have never changed. I laughed bitterly at the irony. An impulse? Tanya, do you realize what you're saying? Do you know how much my heart hurt when I saw that video? Do you know that I've been going crazy every night imagining you and Bob together? My voice began to tremble and my eyes became a little moist. But I didn't stop and continued. I used to trust you so much, love you so much. I thought our relationship was indestructible and could withstand any test. But now, I just realized how wrong I was. Tanya cried even more, apologizing and begging for forgiveness. She said she would make it right and be a good wife again. She said she would never see Bob again, and she would never make the same mistake. But I couldn't listen to her anymore. Tanya's words all sounded like lies to me. I had known her so well, trusted her so much, but now I realized that I had never really known her heart. I shook my head and said wearily, That's enough, Tanya. Stop. I can't trust you. I can't go on with you. I think our marriage has come to an end. Tanya froze. She looked at me in disbelief, as if I was telling a big joke. No, Steve, don't do this. We can still start over. We can still save our marriage. If you're willing to forgive me, if you're willing to give me another chance. I laughed bitterly and shook my head slowly. No, Tanya, it's too late. I gave you a chance. I gave you all my trust and love. But you chose betrayal. You chose deception. Now, I don't have the courage to give you another chance. I stood up and looked at Tanya from a height. At this moment, I felt extremely disappointed and angry. I was disappointed in Tanya's infidelity, disappointed in our fragile relationship. I was angry at Tanya's deception, angry at the trick of fate. I'm getting a divorce, Tanya. I'm ending our marriage. I'm ending this farce. I know this may seem sudden to you. It may seem cruel. But for me, it's the only option. I can't go on like this. I can't live with the lies and the betrayal. Tanya slumped in her chair, sobbing uncontrollably. She seemed to want to say something, to hold on to something. But in the end, she was silent. Perhaps, deep down, she knew that our marriage was irretrievably broken. I took one last look at Tanya and turned to leave the restaurant. I knew that our conversation, our marriage, had come to an end. From now on, we would be strangers and go our separate ways. The decision to divorce, though painful, was necessary. After that conversation, I immediately initiated the divorce process, and Tanya tried to get it back at first, but after seeing my determination, she finally accepted the reality of the situation. In the eyes of the law, our marriage finally came to an end. The moment the judge announced that we were officially divorced, I felt a sense of unprecedented relief. It was as if the stone that had been weighing on my heart had finally fallen to the ground. After the divorce, I asked Tanya to move out of our home. She didn't argue and packed up her belongings silently. Looking at her back, I had mixed feelings in my heart. Once, we were so in love, so affectionate. But now, we have become strangers, and each of us has embarked on different paths in life. After Tanya left, I lived alone in this house full of memories. Every corner seemed to be filled with our laughter and tears. I knew that I had to do something. I had to make a break with the past before I could really start a new life. So, in the silence of the night, I made a decision. I would destroy all memories of Tanya with my own hands and bury our past with my own hands. I went into the storage room and went through all of Tanya's belongings. Her clothes, her books, her pictures, everything. I carried it all out to the backyard and piled it up in a big woodpile. I stood in front of the woodpile with a match in my hand. I took a deep breath and closed my eyes. In my mind, I replayed the moments when Tanya and I met, fell in love, and stayed together. Those beautiful memories flashed like a flashlight, making my eyes wet. But I knew I had to let go. I had to move on. The good things of the past are gone. I can't dwell on memories forever. I can't live in pain forever. I must learn to let go and start over. I opened my eyes with a firm gaze. I lit a match in my hand and threw it at the woodpile. The fire started instantly, lighting up the night. I stood in front of the fire and watched the tongues of fire consume Tanya's belongings and our past. The light of the fire reflected on my face, illuminating my tears. I knew that this was a farewell, a baptism. Through this fire, I would say goodbye to my past self, to the memories of Tanya. In the ashes, I would seek purification of my soul and the power of renewal. I stood quietly in front of the fire, letting the tears flow. I thought back to our little moments, to our laughter and tears. I thanked Tanya for the joy she had brought me, for making me grow up, for making me realize the true meaning of love and betrayal. But now, it's time to say goodbye. It's time to let go of the past and embrace the future. I know that there is a long road ahead, with many unknowns and challenges. The fire gradually went out, leaving a field of ashes. I stared at the ashes, as if seeing my past self and my future self. I turned around and walked towards the house. Each step was so firm and powerful. I knew that I had unloaded the burden of the past and was ready to embark on a new journey. Dear friend, if you are experiencing betrayal and pain in your marriage, I want to share my story with you. Like you, I was once victimized by my wife's infidelity and plunged into an abyss of anger and despair. I tried to retaliate, tried to escape, but eventually realized that the only real solution is to face the problem head-on. Divorce is a difficult decision, but sometimes it is necessary. Only by cutting the ties of the past can we truly begin a new life. Don't be afraid of change. Don't be afraid of the unknown, because every ending is a new beginning. On the night of my divorce, I burned all my ex-wife's belongings. In the ashes, I found the purification of my soul and the courage to be reborn. I realized that life must go on and I must live for myself. Friend, I know your pain and confusion at this moment, but please believe, as long as you face bravely forward, you will be able to get out of the haze, to find their own happiness. Don't let betrayal define your life. Don't let pain bury your soul. In life, there are always sorrows and joys. But as long as we have hope and a vision for the future, nothing can defeat us. Let's embark on this road of rebirth and write a new chapter of our own. Thank you for taking the time to listen to today's story. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe if you haven't already. If you have a story to share about your own or someone else's experience, please feel free to contact me. Take care.